I believe I'm live. Okay, I was doing that as a quick upload, but Logic Only Zone, who I mentioned in the video, asked if he could join, which I saw after I had stopped it. So I'm opening another one, and I've invited Logic Only Zone, and I'm prepared to wait for a medium amount of time for him to show up. And there is a link for anybody else as well that might want to show up in the comments as we speak. And I guess what am I going to do while I wait? I guess I could just, talk more about Logic Only Zones DLC. I have not seen Anaconda make a bad inference, follow a bad inference rule. It seems to me the only complaint, or even less so, Inventive Harvest. Now, sometimes I see them to resort to arguments that I think about logic that are well-intentioned, but not state-of-the-art, not like mine. For example, the whole thing about there is no absolute statements. Well, isn't that an absolute statement? No, because the words are not absolutely perfectly well defined. So a sentence is not absolute. So just saying a sentence doesn't make it absolute. Boom. I also know whether the chicken or the egg came first. The fucking egg. You ever heard of evolution? The egg was around a way lot longer than the chicken. Morons. What was I talking about? Yeah, so Inventive Harvest and Anaconda, they're very logical. Their faith in logic, they are not willing to say yes, and I've put faith, holy hallowed be thy logic's name. It's the only thing. It's all logic is the only thing you could do. And I'll ignore the stuff that isn't logic and just take it for granted. No, they know enough actually about logic that they understand these weaknesses of logic. Both of them use logic. Anaconda's rhetoric might be more feeling his way through, and I've seen some arguments where it seemed to me like he said, we're just going to set the logic aside, and because of our doubts of logic, I'm allowed to do that. And I'm like, well, not so easy. We have had our differences, but in general, he follows proper rules of inference, and certainly Inventive Harvest does. So, and I haven't seen Logic Only Zone do anything other than use the rhetoric, no offense, but probably going to be offensive, but then use the rhetoric of logic. It's kind of like, the scientism of the Nazis trying to make everything one, two, and in this ground. We're German engineers and scientists. And in reality, they believed in all this Hindu mythology, the bullshit side of it, not even the best part of that stuff. They had this whole weird mysticism and stuff that they believed, and this is because the thing is, human beings have these basic urges. You can use logic to figure out that since you like chocolate ice cream better, that you should go pursue getting chocolate ice cream. Maybe you kept getting vanilla because that's what everybody else likes and you wanted to fit in, and then you realize, this isn't paying off. You could use logic to do that, but you can't escape the fact that human beings basically have impulse values that in themselves are non-logical. But that doesn't make them fixed, because we have millions of competing ways of satisfying ourselves. And so all we need to do is find a solution where we can satisfy ourselves without fucking other people over. And so the big question is it possible to satisfy all our impulses without fucking other people over, or is what we really like doing fucking other people over? And the answer to that is some people just like fucking other people over. And those people need to step aside. All right? And the system we create that don't want to fuck each other over, it'll be better for them as well. And if they don't like it, well, I can logically argue all day why we should be that way. But if their values are, well, I'm sorry, I only enjoy living if I can step on somebody else's throat sometime during the day. Well, I guess we just have a difference, in opinion. I don't think logic is going to solve that. All right, you can put up a bunch of logical arguments saying, look, if you want to satisfy your needs in life, being a thief is not really going to do it. It's going to limit you in all these ways. It wouldn't be logical, right? But that's not going to convince a kleptomaniac, right? It's not going to convince somebody that just made a different decision, or it's not even going to convince somebody that knows you're right but thinks, oh, it's too late, or a million other things that relate to them and go back to their impulse of, but I don't want to get up and do that. I have a thrill that I like from this. It's going to come back to these personal feelings that they have. And so logic is a way of sorting those things out, right, and cleaning them up. And if you go back and forth, you can judge your, when you're reasoning with emotions, then the input principles are how you feel about something. And then you logically can deduce what you ought to do because of those feelings. And then if that's some crazy shit, then go back and ask your dog again if he really thinks you ought to do that shit. You sure? You know what I'm talking about, right? Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Cats are communists. Mao, that's not it. Son of Sam, his dog told him to kill people. And I'm like, if your dog tells you to kill people, you don't actually have to do that shit, right? It could just be like to your friends, I've got the most fucked up dog. I don't know what to do with them. I had to put him in the kennel. He says I should kill everybody. Don't do that. If your emotions and desires and your pet are telling you information that lead to a conclusion that is abhorrent, then it's possible you've made a mistake in logic. Yes, but it is also possible that your logic is impeccable and what you want needs to change. I hear that a lot. It's impossible to change what you want. You don't have a choice of what you want. Yes, you do. In so many ways, you have a choice of what to want. First of all, have you not ever heard of acquired tastes? There are things that if you do them enough, you'll acquire the taste for them, like heroin. But there's other things besides heroin and scotch. There's activities. People that, or me, I eat oatmeal because it's good for me. I'm not doing that right now. But I've had this experience many times in my life. When I start eating oatmeal, after a week or two, it's like, I got to have my oatmeal. I want to start again now. But I don't really feel like it. But I know if I just did it, if I found the opportunity, oh, I'm in Sork, yeah, get the oatmeal and we'll make it for a week, then I would come to actually want it. I know with that action, limited amount of energy into doing something awkward, right, that doesn't feel immediately satisfying because I'm just out of the habit. It just sounds like a little oatmeal. But I know, I love it. It's delicious. Put some brown sugar on there, right? So if I put myself in that situation, I know that I will have a reaction. My will, what I want will change, right? You move across the world, what you want is going to change, right? You might be like, my fucking jacket is too thin. I want this. There's this great jacket. I want it. It's kind of expensive. I really, really, really want that. It would just make me so much more comfortable. And if you move to the Bahamas, then you probably won't want that anymore. It's pretty reliable. So that's the thing too, because if you're talking about like Darwin's idea of how evolution happens versus Lamarck, well, of course we know Darwin's is more technically useful. The dynamics, right? It's concrete. The aspect of Darwinian evolution that's still like Lamarck, where animals choose their evolution or their actions have a direct effect on their evolution, is that animals can choose where to build a home. And they could slowly over generations, they'll migrate, or sometimes some animals in a single generation like humans, and they could change their situation. When they change their situation, since they're evolving reaction to their situation, change your environment, change your habitat, evolve as a reaction to your habitat, you've changed the habitat, you have helped direct your own evolution by choosing your setting. Right. And the whole point of talking about meditation is that you can also change your mindset more directly than that. And that's why I can remember that I want to start eating oatmeal again and just make myself do it for a week. I have the strength. Now, if I don't like it for 3 months or a month or after that week, it might peter out. I'm like, nah, it's not working this time. So it's only because of a limited amount of energy that I can come up with, that I could change my situation a little bit and I will be reacting to a different environment and I will feel differently. And I know if it's a calming environment down by the waterfall, I will feel more calm and have more calm thoughts. If I'm upset, maybe I have the energy to go do that. If I'm on the edge, or I have the energy to just go get my gun and go shoot somebody. And you're saying, well, the ball is always a little bit on this side or a little bit on this side, or if it's right on the edge and there's always a little bit of wind or something has to make it happen. What? It has to be some force, but you can't be one of those forces because you have deduced that it's impossible. So anyway, I just remembered I was waiting for. I put the link there. What are you telling me? People telling me they can't get in. The link is. Oh no, that's the event. Oh fuck! It was my fault. Oh, I hate it when it's my fault. Oh, this is like the third or fourth time in my life I've been wrong, and it's just excruciating. But then again, nobody said I put up a comment saying it didn't work. So, but I it doesn't work. I need this other link. I think I did this last time too. I have to wait a little longer. Though actually, if Logic Only had seen it, then oh well. It's a video's worth of video. How long has it been on? Does it say somewhere? Mm-mm. Another thing that Logic Only Zone does have right is along with, having this interest in the fallacies and focus on those, I think that is a good thing to do. Because I buy his argument about why he's not more interested in so far. It's well, I know enough. And I think that's a good thing to look at. You can learn a lot from that. And he's also into evidence. Well, yeah, I didn't like that he tried to accuse me of not going by evidence. I totally wholeheartedly agree. And this is one of the reasons that logic isn't enough, because what you're trying to do in science is you're trying to take evidence, which is reliable input, right? Because principles, man should be this way or that way, man should marry women, and not any principles, those are hard. So instead of principles, we'll just have evidence, facts from nature. Those we can make pretty reliable. Then we can rely on the conclusion. And if the conclusion does turn out to be wrong, we know we made a logic mistake, that our proof was wrong, our math was wrong. Why? Well, because we rely on the evidence is very reliable. So we pinned that down. And we measure the results in the same way that we measure the input. So they're equally solid and pinned down. And so if what you said was going to happen didn't happen, you can tell. And that's how science progresses. So I agree with the evidence issue. But yeah, I saw he had a big snake. Pliskinist was in, he had a 4-hour hangout. So when he commented to me, I'm like, okay, and fair enough, because I just talked about him. I wasn't planning on doing any more videos. So we're going to see here. I put the other link up. If he or anybody else wants to come, he says, can I join? And I figured, I did talk about him. It's kind of a what happens if I click on his page? Let's try one more time. Maybe I get a hangout message. Logic Only Zone. I should be able to do it from in here. I'll do it from in here. The thing is, he could have more than one account, and then he wouldn't be seeing the Hangout invitation. Now, the other thing in general, in talking about will and all the rest of this stuff, I don't want to play. I don't want to play this game talking about this 1,000-year-old. You know, we can't. We're breaking down these ideas of object. Yeah, we believe and apply them, but we have an explanation for where it comes from. It's not a self-starting axiom. This idea of things and properties. We invented it to match some phenomena, and so there's a lack of mystery in where we're supposed to start. Really, right? If you could think of a higher agreement that includes more, fine. But I know a minimal one that we have to agree to. Everybody here is going to agree to. A Christian or any theist should agree to it, which is that we are getting information through our senses and all of our perceptions, right? So the feeling of hunger is kind of like a sense. We experience it as a certain quality. It's hard to describe because how are you going to describe the, but you can, sound and touch, and they all have their different ways of giving you spatial information and whatnot. Color is different from sound. It's hard to describe the difference, but we know clearly that the brain, just from the 5 senses, can have these different kind of spaces. Some of them are pain, and touch itself is many different senses, right? So we're getting information that way, and the brain is processing it, all right? And what is the result of that processing? Well, it depends how far you want to count the process, right? We're part of a system. You could say that you don't have to be looking at an individual human, but one way or another, probably for our purposes, the output is behavior. We might want to think of them as beliefs and stuff like that, but if calling it a belief is something that implies some ideas that amount to a theory, on what the result of the information processing is. But we know as a physical creatures that we get this energy and information through our senses, and that we behave. Other people can see us behave. We can watch ourselves behave. The question of will then is just, we have input sensations that feel just like pain feels like pain, and hunger feels like hunger, and happiness feels like happiness, love feels like love, and heat feels like heat, and red looks like red. Okay. Sometimes we see things that feel like we're doing them intentionally, and we call that us willing it and being intentional. That's what we're naming the string of those moments. That's what that's what the only thing we have to go on to define what we mean by will is these episodes that we sense, that we see. It feels like we're doing something. Well, it seems like the sun's rising too. All we know is there's information, something's happening. We know a phenomenon is happening because this is the phenomenon. The stream of information, it's what we experience. It is the one phenomena. So to say it's what it means to exist. To say anything else exists means that it happens in this stream of information. If the number 2 really exists, I'm just saying that it happens in the stream of information. Now, where does it exist? Just in the stream? Or is it also out in the real world? Is the red photon, is redness out in the real world? Is the red light out in the world? Is the red photon out in the world? Well, there's a bunch of parts of the red phenomena. The red color, that's a neurological thing. The red photon, it's out there. Now, is there a number 2 out there? Is it just, it exists because it's a part of this flow of information and the processing of it, processing the information into behavior, right? That's what's going on. We're processing information into behavior. Whereas the cloud, it has behavior, but it doesn't seem to be processing information to generate the behavior. It seems to be reacting. Not even reacting. Reacting implies a processing of information. It is, no matter how tumultuous the storm looks, it is in fact just sitting there in a Zen-like pose, unconcerned and non-reactive, happening. It's already happening. It's not trying to change what's happening. It's not reacting to what's happening in any informational. None of the energy is being transformed into information storage matrices. But in our case, all of that is happening, right? Now, it doesn't make us computers because this isn't a computer. This is an organ. It might use physics we don't know about yet. It might have a kind of a thing that it can do stuff Turing machines can't do, right? It could be that you could simulate it with a computer, but you'd need an infinitely strong computer. It could be the other way around. Oh, great. Cool. Well,
Hey,
I'm gonna have to like take a break and smoke a cigarette then so we could start a conversation because I just got myself all worked up making a video basically. Thanks
okay.
for coming in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like when I read what you write, I totally agree with you, and everything you say makes sense. I don't know if it's that the way that you speak is a little bit different than you write, but when I hear you speak, it doesn't make as much sense to me. I don't know. That's just I just want to like tell you what my experience is of your like communication pattern or whatever. But you know, it's subjective, so.
Well, I think there's probably a big difference for various reasons. I mean, one, uh, I'm left-handed, and the reason I'm left-handed and things like that, you know, it's not necessarily the same parts of the brain that are generating language when you write and when you speak. And most people, it would be, but like when you're left-handed, in my case, some of my language functions have to vacate the area. So, but also since I'm a programmer, I do a lot of technical writing, and I got a philosophy degree, wrote that's a kind of technical writing. You have to write logical stuff, and so I communicate more differently. And since you're into, I mean, I think my interpretation of what you mean by your endorsement of logic is, you know, really liking a straightforward way of talking, basically. So, and
Yeah.
that, you know, it's more direct, but it's more technical. A lot of people don't like it, and I've been told in business environments I should talk to people face to face to work out our disagreement. You know, the writing pins him down. So, yeah. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I'm saying the same stuff.
Yeah, and I like to box myself in the arena of if I gotta have evidence that we can understand, or I just can't apply it because like I don't want to end up in a place where I'm assuming anything that I can't just be like, oh, here you go, this we know this, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So anyway, that's where I like to limit my. It's a comfortable place to be, right?
But isn't there an issue? It is a comfortable place to be, and I'm very or too logical in some sense. So I'm a big advocate. That's, I mean, I think my understanding, or what I think of as my understanding of its limits, come from being a big fan of logic. But I think an issue here is Inventive Harvest and Anaconda. Now, I've seen sometimes where Anaconda might just say, well, we have to put that whole logical argument aside. And that rhetoric certainly sounds like he's trying not to use it. But on the other hand,
Oh,
actually, when you watch him, he does not make logical fallacies usually in when he is arguing, oh, but hey, this and then that, he's not
can I,
making a
can I give an
logical
example?
fallacy. Okay.
Okay, so he made a slippery slope argument when he made a video recently of if you lose, logic can lead to tyranny, and that's a slippery slope argument. So I mean like you can catch him where he does break it.
Well, but see, that's why I was pointing
So
out
it
the
happens.
fallacy. If he had used a fallacy in his argument that it can lead
Yeah,
to
but
that,
I would
there
argue
is a
I would
non-fallacious argument. I mean, the main issue is you can start from Nazi principles, use regular logic, and come to the conclusion that you need to do Nazi things. And people, if they're just going to buy because there was a logical argument, they can be led to doing crazy things. Now,
yeah.
there's a lot
And
of
can you
fallacy in
explain
the.
why we can use the Can you explain why we can use the fallacy first? Because that's where your argument begins. So
Okay, well, the
yeah.
idea of that one is, to my view, there's really a very small set of logical fallacies that actually apply to traditional first order logic, and then there's this much bigger family that have to do with how we all reason, and so the fallacy is somewhere more in the gray area, as far as, it's not like it's technical. I don't see it as super technical, but the idea is, if he's saying that logic can lead to tyranny, an abuse of logic, or just logic, however it was said, and they used a fallacy in linking those two, it doesn't mean those two aren't linked. A non-fallacious argument might still be discovered that links the two. The fallacy is thinking that he's wrong in his idea that he's asserting that they're linked, just because he hasn't made the argument correctly.
Okay, but I guess but you would agree that he didn't make the argument correctly, because he starts with a conclusion. You don't.
Isn't it a common sense
right?
thing he's saying, though? I mean, I do believe we should. Sorry to talk over you. I'll try not to do that. But
no, it's okay. Yeah, it's fine. We're both working with each other, so it's okay.
So I do. I believe that it's something we can dig into, this question, and we could definitely try to make a better argument. I didn't. I've seen him. I might have seen that video. I've seen him talk about that. I think that it wasn't necessarily presented as an argument. I think, isn't it a common sense thing? I mean, isn't there don't we all accept that you can have like an imperial bureaucracy that just follows logic, and it will lack compassion, which is an atrocity? So, or you can have principles that seem sound about property and stuff in libertarianism, implement them all logically, and find out that their ramifications are horrible. That wasn't obvious from the start.
Yeah, but you even then, and within that statement, there is some kind of an assumption, because you don't have evidence that if we really were ruled by logic, then it would lead to tyranny. You really just can't make that argument. I really don't see
how. I want to promote logic. I think they should teach logic to kindergartners. I think they could wait to teach math until high school if they wanted, and they should just be teaching syllogisms and stuff. Those kids can actually use that in their life. They're being taught math at a part of their life where it really is true that they're not going to use it much yet. Some clever kids, fine, so teach kids math young, that's okay, but logic they can actually use right away, and syllogisms are simple, kids can get them. I want to promote more logical use, but the problem is, and I think Anna Konovat is correct in this, and is trying to make this kind of point, is that that's not sufficient. You can't just go off of that, because you have to, logic is about rules of inference. You got to start with something. How do you get what you start with?
You need a base to begin, and logic is that key.
But logic is just the inference system. But maybe you mean by logic something different, but that's why we have to talk about this definition of logic. Because logic is traditionally the inference. So I have some ideas. They are themselves. If I assume they're true, I can use logic to find out everything else that's true. That would be true, I mean.
So how I see logic is the rational analyzation of natural systems or constructs. And so if I look at nature and the way that nature functions, like the circle of life, that's a logical system where each thing connects to the other thing that causes the other thing to be able to be alive, and they all function together within a reasonable way that it makes sense. And you can look at the evidence and how they're functioning, everything's functioning together. And so what I'm saying is logic functions, that this is a natural thing, that it's logical to look at systems in this way. And so, okay, let's look at the human system, and let's look at that objectively and see how we can logically function that to get things to be functioning in an orderly fashion. And so when I think of logic, it's like an analysis of evidential objective systems. And I know like you explained, there are other types of logic and things like this, but when I'm using it, I'm within this spectrum, and that's all I'm considering.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's why you're talking about that. Well, okay, so it's an interesting thing because there's a couple things. Because, okay, I would point out on one side, there's this technical thing that everything still is logical, even if it seems so chaotic. There has to be some logical thing. So I would interpret what you're saying too is, similar to me in terms of it's pretty freaking clear that our world is not acting logically. We do illogical things, and as a society, we spend money. As individuals, we spend money, and not to bring it all down to money-wise, there's a million things wrong, and everybody agrees there's stuff wrong, but we disagree what to do about it. So
Hmm.
we do need to be more rational about things in our natural life, and also I would say though, we're just talking about semantics. So. Before it became physics, before there was this spin-off physics, there was a school of philosophers that were natural philosophers. And it's kind of funny because you'd almost think that why wouldn't they all be natural philosophers? But no, philosophers like Plato, they hated on nature. They said nature was ugly and imperfect, and only in this world of forms was there was a perfect leaf somewhere, and every oak leaf you've ever seen is an ugly, imperfect copy of this, Mount Olympus leaf, and that was, the idea, and a lot of them did it. There was the pre-Socratics, some of everything's made of fire, everything's made of, well, they didn't necessarily take an empirical view to that. And natural philosophy grew out of, what, we can find this out, and we can have theories about if there's fire and stuff. And look, there is, and it's coming out when we burn it. Oh, no, let's rethink what the elements are and you can slowly. And the thing is, this integrates logic, right? Just like all philosophies integrate logic, whether they make a mistake or not. Usually it's the principles that are wrong. Philosophies all across the board, at least the top-notch people in that belief system, like Benatar, he's doing top-notch logic. I think there's errors, but there can always be errors. It's well done. Everybody has access to logic. So you got logic in skepticism as well, and you have this idea that you have to look at nature. And if you believe that, that's just everything that's about evidence and empiricism and science. That's it. And so that's the cycle. That's what I'm taking you to be talking about, is what I still call natural philosophy. And Isaac Newton still called natural philosophy, though by that time it had split off, and it started to be like, you know what, you guys, we are so specialist. We're not even philosophizing. We're just trying to find out how it works. What are the patterns? But those of us that are thinking logically in regular life and politics, we can't say we're scientists, but we still do use this natural philosophy. You go back and forth between your logic, then you get evidence, make estimates and guesses. They don't work. Check if the logic was wrong. Check if the logical system was wrong. Of course, we have after a couple thousand years, the thing is, we have good logical systems, so you can't just say, oh yeah, but logic isn't perfect. No, we have 2,000 years of some logical systems that usually, if there's a problem, it's because you didn't use the math, you didn't do the proof right, or the principles were wrong. So yeah, that's interesting. Well, okay, that makes me feel a little bit better, because like one thing was bugging me was kind of your I liked on a personal level your answer of, well, yeah, I haven't looked into that level of logic because I'm kind of happy with the level of logic I'm working with now. It's suiting me, and I think that's great. And I wish we would teach logic younger, and everybody. You don't have to be a logician, and go to, and it makes more sense now. Though also I cut you a break because for that lack of curiosity, because I do think that if there's something that people could, like one logic thing that everybody could probably enjoy and read in the bathroom, it'd be a little relatively small book of fallacies, or the fallacy poster.
Yeah.
After talking to you, I printed out this great fallacy poster.
Oh, great.
Bigger one. But also I would put in that category, and you might be into it, is paradoxes.
Okay, and I think what I want to say is that the trouble is how human beings have the tendency to get bogged down by unnecessary detail. And what I'm saying is we need a good basis and we got to bring people up to that basis. Yeah. And I mean that, like, going beyond the sort of stuff that you guys are doing is interesting, but keeping a good perspective that we're like, don't apply it yet because we don't quite get it. That's what I'm saying. And like I see Anekantavad as kind of implying it, where the evidence isn't there to imply it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I have to tell you, there's a part I miss that to me, I've talked to a lot of people. There was one guy on here that believed in the Hindu stuff, and when push came to shove, though he was pretty rational in his presentation, I think he probably had a little point in his life where, I don't know, whatever, people go through things, but it became clear that no, he believed like the Hindu gurus that zenned out could fly and stuff.
Oh, really?
And there's a whole spectrum from that, and yet he was on the rational, making logical arguments. You could talk to him. I mean, because there's obviously people like that there's not even any talking to. They just, whatever. And then there's a bunch of other people. There's Thou Art That, and people that have, they're not willing to commit even that the world's physical. But when I talk to them over the years, it's like, I want to see how many logical fallacies, basically. Not to count or like I'm watching, but I mean, it soaks in whether or not they're willing to basically accept arguments from the evidence of their senses. I don't really care if they think the senses come from the Matrix, Vishnu's dream, it's a bunch of BBs, quantum verse and a half or whatever. If you will take the evidence from things you've seen, hopefully, but not necessarily things you could show me. But look, we don't have to be a scientist. If you had a ghost experience and you're talking about your actual experience, I'll talk about it, whether it's a hallucination or not. I probably find it interesting, but if it's something I can see, then we're getting into scientific areas. And if you could do that, then basically, you're off of my woo-woo chart where you're one of these guys that just believes whatever you want. No, and I think Anekantavad is well in the not just believing what he wants in general. Now, sometimes he seems like the kind of guy, no offense, Anekantavad, that would deal with a stressful, logical, indeterminate thing by going, I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to go do something that makes my heart feel better.
Well, okay, but I mean, like, before talking about that, I mean, like, I just had a discussion with him in a comment section where I said it seems that the human biological functionality is there for survival purposes, and now I said it seems, and so I'm just saying, like, the evidence to me seems pointing in this direction, and see, he tries to corner you, and he tries to sort of catch you, and you're like, oh, well, this is sort of like a faith, and I'm like, oh, no, it's not. I said it seems, this is me expressing my vague, like I don't quite know for sure, like this just appears this way, and so he has a trouble with like he's trying to get me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe
but that's
because,
actually his logical side, right? He has the tools of logic, and he's
the
problem with you is that he has some different.
He should know already that I'm not saying this as a fact. And so
I'm not here to defend Anekantavad, in any
I know, but I'm
general
just saying,
way like that. We've had our differences, right? But I am in the sense of, like, I'd say that's part of his logical side, and it's sort of a thing about what we're saying about logic of, logic isn't enough because there's some input principles. Like I could tell you, Anekantavad and I, he's taken it to the level, I don't want to misquote him or anything, but the kind of idea is that there's a lot of problems in the world. Like we were talking about, is the world good enough? And Anekantavad, I thought he would go this way, and he knows things are terrible in the world. He doesn't lack compassion, but philosophically, yeah, he is able to go, well, in a way, this is what you get, and in a sense, I think that's facilitated by an ability to say, yes, here's a logical argument, I'm perfectly competent to follow it, and I believe he's a compassionate person. I will bet you he's done things in his life to help other people and take care of these things that he's seen.
Well,
still philosophically, he could put it to the side. Well,
but his linguistic patterns and the tones he chooses. See, I'm a musician and I'm also a linguist, so I actually understand how tones function and how to use them to project emotional things. And he uses manipulative emotional tones in his speech patterns. So.
A linguist in what kind of?
No, I study linguistics and tone and things like that.
Well, do you know, because the best and most logical arguments
like Pyrrho. if I speak to you like this, then you have to believe me because I'm speaking in such an assertive way that regardless of any truth or value in my words, I am going to make you think what I want. That is the way that he speaks, and it's entirely manipulative.
I see. Yeah, that makes
Okay?
sense. That was that kind
Yeah.
of. I see that he has a tone. I'm not endorsing that. That's my interpretation of it, but I do agree, and we
Yeah.
will all have that kind of thing.
So
But
he
let me.
has
No, my
some
gotcha on
tendencies.
that is you also said inventive harvest, and they
Oh,
seem
I
like
take
good
that
neighbors.
back now,
Now
though. I take that back now.
he's not that tone. He's very much like, well, I wasn't very happy with what you said, but here's what I think. So he's not doing that. So what's your
Yeah,
excuse there?
him and me made up, so
Okay, good. Okay,
cheers.
cheers.
Yeah, so he drew a cute little picture in the end. Like, he was just kind of being my Lex Luthor, and that's cool. Superman needs a Lex Luthor.
So with the linguistics, the thing is, I was going to say that the most logical and well supported, and it is scientific work on what the problem is with classical logic is the work by this linguist George Lakoff, who's a Berkeley linguist and part of cognitive linguistics, so part of cognitive science. They work with philosophers and neurologists and cognitive psychologists. And they've done a lot of very interesting studies. And so, for example, what is it even useful? Well, he has things like where mathematics comes from, and he talks about how the mathematics, in the sets of set theory and the way they have to work in math, how they break down when we're trying to classify species. Basically, it's not that there's nothing left over. It's just that the human mind thinks a lot more in terms of clustering algorithms than in hard sets. We think of clustering algorithms and then we draw the hard set around it, and really we only use the hard set when it's in the middle. When it gets to the edge, you start to see so just simple physical things like how animals are in the same species if they can have sex and reproduce, but you have animals where bird A and B can interbreed, B and C can interbreed, and C and D can interbreed, and then A and D can't. So where's the if you have a classical version, just the logic, not this thing of natural philosophy of the whole idea of being reasonable and evidentiary, but the specific, Aristotelian logic, that's not how categories are supposed to work. So a lot of this argument, I think, sometimes is over that. I mean, a lot of times someone with your perspective that's just saying, but really, you're saying we have to be skeptical. We're going for the evidence. It's a classic skeptical argument of ancient skepticism.
What I'm saying is like, in terms of what I can tell people. If I'm going to tell people things, I need to be able to prove it without any argument. I need to be able to show it and have it be real for it to be real.
What if that's never possible? That's never quite possible.
But it is though.
But look at F equals ma. You're going to ever invent one better than Isaac Newton? F equals ma, and then he proved it to everybody it was possible, and everybody thought it was the way things worked for 150 years or whatever. And then, oh, sorry, it was just an approximation. We have general relativity. It's not quite the whole story. There's a grain of truth in it. So it seems to me, with that standard, if you can make an argument that has a grain of truth, the signal to noise makes it valuable. You can't always get rid of the noise. There's always going to be this, what's the next improvement? You can
right,
always.
But that doesn't justify anything. It just means that logic, logic can be wrong logic sometimes. So you could be trying to use logic, but not be completely logical. But when everybody's using logic, or when a group of people is using logic, you have natural checks and balances between the people to secure the logic of the argument. And so it's just an issue of just people not using it to a degree where enough people are able to check and balance each other. But like, you can really do logic if you have a group of people doing it. Like, obviously, if one person is making a logical argument, it could be flawed. But if you have 30 people in the room with them, there's that pressure because everybody's using logic. So it's really just a degree of having enough brains at work on the same problem, kind of thing. And then you can get the logic of it. Because if you're wrong, you're just going to be wrong. because logic is
Well, isn't
logic.
the problem that people just don't really know? I mean, because again, the general thing is everybody has their system of inference. It's just that they're full of fallacies, and people just don't even know.
Hmm.
They're not exposed to it. It's hard to find out if you want to know. They don't, because it's the kind of thing that really could be intuitive, like arithmetic, if they started teaching it younger. I do think reading the fallacies and you know, I've seen those become more well known. So there is somewhat of a trend there, but we're in this weird world where things get more chaotic and crazy and less logical, but there is still a trend of, you know, no, there's more discovery. Same with like atheism or something. But I really want to say again too on this, with this angle of the topic, that the paradoxes, like I have a small book of paradoxes, and it's really interesting because most of the paradoxes are from history and they've been solved. You can figure them out. It's like in the video I just made earlier, I was talking about the chicken and the egg one. You know, everybody still, when I was a kid, acted like that's was a big mystery, and now more and more people are like, well, probably an egg because lizards lay eggs. It's not, you know, in most in history, most paradoxes are solved that way, or with some technical system that supposedly solves it, but you could still raise the question again. But and most of the time it's words that weren't as useful. Like you get into ones like a paradox of the heap, like
But okay, okay,
when
but
does a
like,
pile of sand become a heap? You know, there is no point, and it's really just that you should think of it different. So it's a good thing because you'll find out, oh, I don't have that paradox because I'm a modern person. I actually already internalized, and then you learn the kind of mistakes we're making now, right? We're making everything that seems like a paradox isn't, is the theory in philosophy, right? There is no real paradox. It's always works out. Paradox is
okay,
because we don't understand yet.
okay. So we talked about the way. So the way I'm looking at this. So I want to know, like, so what is your, so what are you doing? Like, what are you trying to? Are you trying to just get people interested in these abstract ideas, or are you preaching the abstract ideas? Because you know, watching Gary's videos and things like that, it seems like people are portraying you as this person who's actually preaching the like application of illusions within your thought processes and choices and
Really?
things like
Oh,
this. Yeah,
that's good
that's
news. Yeah, no,
so
I also think I
that's
should
what
preach
I'm getting.
more.
Yeah,
I really done this
yeah.
as a conversation, which is why I was like, oh, you were around? Okay, yeah, let's have a conversation. And I believe in this public dialogue, both that it's public and individual to individual. So I've just been, you know, doing that as a hobby because I enjoy it. But I do think, yeah, I have a system, and I'm writing a book right now. And on here, I've been working a lot, really, on the logical basis, the relativistic skepticism, which is how you can triangulate on sufficient truth. In other words, you can increase a signal to noise. Right, you got information. There's always noise, but there is a signal to noise ratio, and so you can process that and get truth. And how does that work? Even though, you know, things like words don't have absolute definitions, and how could that work without? And so, you know, I do believe in that, and I feel actually I should promote it. And sometimes talking to Gary is what makes me feel that way, because Gary's always unabashedly like, I've got to promote these ideas. It's no worth it if there's not more people. And me, I just
Well,
want enough people to talk about it with.
but isn't it illogical to think that words can express sort of an idea, but like in terms of their emotional value, I don't think words actually mean anything unless you're like trying to express a specific like
Yeah.
thought.
I mean, frankly, I
Yeah,
think a lot of this stuff's been figured out, you know, and I'm sorry, but I shouldn't think that. But like, if you like linguistics
yeah.
seriously, try out George Lakoff and read it, skim it because he can go so slow. But he'll be referencing actual neurological studies and actual psychological studies and actual languages of other people and how, you know, this stuff works. And because the thing
Uh,
is,
Okay, wait,
words.
but before you go on, like even though you're suggesting that, let's not. But that doesn't mean that I don't have an understanding of
No,
linguistics.
you don't. But I want, with
Yeah,
reference to that, to give credit to him. I'm
yeah.
about to say why this is known. What the word is, whether it's written or anything, it's like a fucking icon on your desktop. If you say the word elephant, boom, the elephant folder opens up, and Dumbo's there, and Peanuts are there, and teak wood is there. If you know that, in my case. You know, I always think of the guys that use the elephants to get to teak, but some people wouldn't think of that. But when you say elephant, and he always uses this example in one of his books was titled this, but don't think of an elephant. You know, if you tell someone don't think of an elephant, they might wipe their mind of the elephant really quickly, but you have to think of an elephant. So in a sense, saying a word is like pressing an icon in somebody else's mind. And this is one reason that words can hurt people so much, because you are actually going bing, 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 you know, like little ripples of water are going out, but it's actually whole word spaces, you know?
Well, actually, as somebody who speaks multiple languages, what it really is you're creating a connection between two concepts within your mind, the elephant, the physical image of the elephant. Yeah, and so it's just part of the brain programming thing.
Yeah.
But it's still not like real. It's just a way that you set your brain up, and you can do that. You can mold your brain to be any way you want in that way.
Right. Right. But that's exactly what I'm saying. But I get to say that it's real, because now here's what it. But all it is an icon. It's as real as an icon, right?
But it's objectively real because there's evidence for it.
Well, what do you mean it's objectively real?
I can take a flashcard and I write elephant on one side, and I draw a picture of an elephant on the other side, and that's how I'm going to insert that information into my mind. So I use an objectively, so the method that I actually learn information through is basically, as you said, objectively. Like I had one piece of information on one side of the card and one piece of information on the other. And then through setting it in this fashion, my brain creates a separate connection, because when I look at one side, it's one piece, the other side, the other piece. And because I'm putting...
You mean when you're learning a new language?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is like there's evidence to explain why that is a real thing. And so that's a logical function. It's not an illusion.
Well, that's the thing about Lakoff. It's all logic. He's just saying that the old ideas of categories, you know, it's like these guys that are in their philosophers, in the end, when they do criticize logic, what they're really doing is saying, hey, I got a new version of logic, and it doesn't backfire. You know, and maybe they're right or wrong. And in, you know, in Lakoff's case, he has some good ideas, but not every idea is, you know, I don't agree with, you know, just you're not supposed to. So what languages do you know?
Japanese and English, and I speak some Chinese.
I always like to say that anybody under 30 should learn Chinese.
Yeah, I'm gonna get back on Chinese and work on it, but yeah.
So I find it a really fascinating culture.
Yeah, but it's like I don't know. They're collectivist and.
Yes and no. Yeah. Are they really? I mean, it's arguable that
Chinese are kind of like
exactly that all of this communism we're raised with, and the terrible government they have now, and they're cracking down again, I guess, the new dude, and is the reaction to the opium wars, which is not to say that it doesn't make them crazy. I mean, if you do something to somebody and it drives them crazy, you're still like, well, I wish I could apologize, but he's crazy now. But I don't think they are. I think they have a lot of power to recover just on this principle. As I've looked through history and keep going back and forth, and I always kind of have this Western, you know, education, and I took Latin, so I was reading, you know, all the old, you know, so it's kind of this ancient thing. It's the Western world. Well, you think of it, China is over there and doing its own thing and having its own turmoil, but the thing is, the same Chinese government, social governmental system that is around today, it never fell. That's the same one that was back there during the Roman times.
Yeah, it's the same
before
society. Same with Japan. Yeah. Same with Japan.
And they thought of us as barbarians, which we were, and they would have never given in to us if they hadn't come up with the opium thing. So it's really always been about China, because then you go back to the and this I only learned recently, is that so the Chinese silk was a big commodity in Rome. There was even a ration on it at one point and stuff. And yet there's only a record of 2 people ever going to China as envoys from Rome, and it's on the Chinese side. There's no record of that on the Roman side that we have. But they all went through Iran, basically. Iran and those areas in there, those guys were the ones that were going back and forth. And of course, all the people along the Silk Road in China, all the little merchants that were doing 50 and 20 or whatever miles that made that. But as far as who connected those two places, it's this Babylon, this seed of civilization. Those are the people that were in the East and Western world. And the point is, they did connect it, and it's always been about China. And it's still about China, and the whole doing the Opium War was because we wanted to get in on some Chinese action and their economy and their beautiful stuff. And then it worked, and we knocked them down, and they looked like a third world country, like some country that was populated by the Europeans and never was civilized, and you know, we gave them fire, and really that's all a big fucking illusion. It's about China. It's obvious that they've got all the people. It's obvious they own all our debt. It's obvious. Learn Chinese! But I don't have to. I'm 47, so I'm fucking old enough to not learn.
Yeah.
I'll still need a translator, but hopefully they'll make a computer that'll do it.
Well, China's weird because if you look at, so Japanese culture is like incredibly influenced by Chinese culture because of Confucianism, and of course the symbols they use in their language are from Chinese, and Japanese have just sort of copied everything. So I mean, Japan has always been like a parasite culture. Even their people sort of parasite it off of each other. It's very like socialistic and collectivistic, and that's fine. And I mean, like, what you say about China kind of makes sense, and yeah, I mean...
Well, sometimes when the Chinese get that, and you know Chinese families, and they have this traditional conservatism, but if you look at the whole culture, really, sometimes it's what we're thinking about of the Japanese culture, which also is not entirely fair because, again, we went and fucked with them, made them open their borders, and realized they needed to get militarized. So we brought out this shogun side of them that they'd managed to calm down to a peaceful kingdom for a couple hundred years. So, but anyway, we think about China, but that's funny, you know, when you look at the characters of the Asian nations, like just their characteristics and kind of the cultural vibe, they are a lot of individual, you know, there's a history of Thailand that has a certain character to it, and Japan and the Koreans certainly. China is all of the above. And that's the thing, too, about the collectivism is like, well, all the empires I knew, they made the people speak English or the language and have the religion, and Chinese were like, they still have 200 languages, and if you go and get the anthropologists in there, they'll say they'll probably find out there's 2,000 religions still too. So it's amazing how heterogeneous, and no doubt that's why it lasted 10,000 years. And it's like, do you ever see this movie Hero?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. That makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
And yet they got their taxes. You can't say they didn't fight their wars and get rich and have their taxes. But have you ever seen the movie Hero? It's a Chinese language movie, I think Jet Li. And
yeah, a long time ago.
It makes that point about the guy ends up helping the Chinese king to win. He's obviously a bad man, but it means peace for China. And it's this weird kind of thing. And as a Westerner, I'm like, fuck that shit. Let's keep fighting. You know what I mean? Fight forever. And I do believe that in my gut. That's how I believe. And it's kind of, when you're talking about being logical, it's like, be logical. We can't just keep giving in for some kind of peace, you know, Romana thing. But you got to give some credit to it. You got to give some credit to it, right? If you have people that aren't going to become totally crazy leaders, they just want power and they're going to keep the things running on time. It's like the Machiavellian idea that, well, if you do have to live in a kingdom, then you want a king that's a kick-ass so that some other kingdom doesn't take you over. But
yeah.
Anyway, well, I'm going to wrap it up. It's been fun talking to you, though.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to be off for 2 weeks, and somebody should have a hangout at that time and keep it going or whatever. I'm thinking I need to have a shared channel so other people can do it because I can't give the keys to my channel. But anyway, I'll be back in 2 weeks, though.
Okay, I do hang out on the same day as you, so.
Really? Is it the overlap time? That wasn't intentional.
Yeah, I know. You start 1 hour after me.
Oh, really? So I could come hassle you for an hour and then try to get your audience over there.
Yeah, you can give it a shot. Yeah.
I like the Sunday afternoon. I could shift it a little bit. And I'm talking about moving it for some people, and there's no reason to be totally rigid. But having a schedule seemed important, and I realized, what fucking day of the week am I really that reliable? And Sunday's going to be the best, but things like this when I'm traveling, I can't. I was thinking of doing it on the road, but you know, hotel Wi-Fi still sucks ass.
Just do your work. Yeah.
Well, there's that too. Yeah. Well, and one day I'm actually going to be on the plane, but anyway, well, nice talking to you, and I think it's good too because I think we understand each other a lot better, and yet we still have plenty of stuff to bitch and moan and disagree about, obviously. So that's the ideal situation.
Okay. Yeah,
All right.
I think so too.
All right. Cheers.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.